Cleaver has a son, Jeremy, with permanent brain damage who finds medicinal cannabis suppresses the symptoms and helps with seizure control. She's also an advocate of medicinal cannabis. Good afternoon, Lynn.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Well, thanks. Lynn, if we have a look at how the medicinal cannabis access scheme is going so far in Tassie, have you applied for your son to this scheme?
An application was put through on behalf of Jeremy. Fortunately, that was stalled due to his neurologist ceasing his care. So since then, we've struggled to find a neurologist willing to put forward another application. So we're kind of in a holding pattern at the moment.
Why have you struggled to find a neurologist to do that? Is because you can't find a neurologist or because you can't find a neurologist who's willing?
Well, it's slim pickings at the moment. You know, at the Launceston General, I think there's a couple of locums and a fly-in neurologist, one of whom we see. And I'm not sure why he doesn't really want to prescribe. He did indicate to us that the controlled access scheme is very difficult and it's a very lengthy process. And pretty much at this moment in time, he's not willing to apply on behalf of Jeremy. So basically we're sort of in a situation where we know cannabis assists him and helps him and gives him a better quality of life, but we have to operate illegally in order to offer him that help.
Are there any other avenues for you to access this scheme?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Are you aware how many people have been able to access the cannabis access scheme?
As far as I know, there's 6 patients that have been approved. A couple of them I know personally. I heard Mr. Ferguson yesterday when he was asked a question, about the cannabis access scheme. He was saying that their model puts the process into the hands of doctors. Well, that's 6 patients and their doctors. If you out here on the ground, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of Tasmanians seeking out cannabis, getting their hands on it any way they can, and more often than not, without medical supervision. So I don't think it's wise to brag about 6 patients when there's so many doing this illegally.
Why do you think there is that massive discrepancy between the number of people who are accessing this scheme and the number of people who, as you're saying, find that cannabis helps and are using it anyway, not through the scheme?
I think part of the problem is perhaps if there were a round table situation where all stakeholders can come to the table and discuss, their experience. Obviously, Minister Ferguson is impressed with 6 patients, but as advocates across the state, we're having 6 or 7 people contact us a week.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. So, I mean, that information is obviously, there's a disconnect there. And we find a lot of people quite often don't have a specialist. They cannot get access. So, they seek out cannabis any way they can.
We were just speaking to Jared Bartle, a sessional lecturer in criminal law, and he was talking about the research that's been done, which shows that a majority of Australians support medicinal cannabis. Given that, why do you think, the laws that flow on from that are so slow in coming through?
I'm not sure, honestly. I think perhaps policies and legislation was passed without appreciating what's really happening on the ground. I know when Minister Ferguson released the controlled access scheme, he called us to tell us he'd fixed it. This was the right thing to do. But here we are 10 months later, and very few people have access. So I think perhaps better discussion between all stakeholders will improve that. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a situation where Tasmanians are going to continue to risk the black market or home grow like we do in order to find the relief that they deserve.
For a lot of people who don't have a personal experience with someone who finds medicinal cannabis helpful to manage their symptoms, what is it like for someone like Jeremy, when they don't have access to medicinal cannabis versus when they do?
if because medicinal cannabis controls Jeremy's seizures more effectively than the conventional medicines, if he were to, say, if we were to be raided and his medicine was confiscated, which under law it would be, Jeremy would certainly be detrimental to his health and probably lead to an early death. So, this is his medicine. And I think, generally speaking, Tasmanians and Australians are starting to appreciate that cannabis does have medicinal benefit. And I think part of it, I think the stigma is washing away from the general population. It just doesn't seem to be getting through to the politicians, unfortunately.
Well, you said that better discussion is one way to move this forward. What else are you hoping for, would you like to see?
I think we need a scheme that covers different levels. I understand that some patients desire a highly refined product through their pharmacy or their specialist. And then I think we should be looking at, like jurisdictions in the United States where they have a dispensary herbalist model where patients, with their doctor's permission, can go to a dispensary and find a cannabis therapy that works for them. And then I think at the bottom of that should be registered personal home grow.
Lynn Cleaver, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
No worries, thank you.